All right, let's get cooking here. This is episode 121 of The Anxious Truth. Dudes and dudettes, welcome back to the show. We're calling it the show now. That's the new thing. It's been for about 6 weeks. It's sort of stuck, so I'm just going to keep going with it. I hope you guys are all right with that. Whatever, it's the show. So anyway, episode 121, we're going to do this as a two-parter, and I'll tell you what's going on. We're going to do viewer mail. That's like the old David Letterman show. We're going to answer questions from the listeners. This is from my Instagram account, the.anxious.truth. This morning I decided, hey, you know what? My inboxes are absolutely jam-packed with questions I'm never going to be able to get to. I'm sorry, guys. I would love to. I just can't. So I invited people to ask me questions on Instagram and said I would do my best to answer them here on this week's podcast. There are so many questions that I'm actually going to do two parts on this. So it'll be this week and next week we'll answer questions because I probably should be doing these more often. But so we will do part one now. I'm going to lump some questions together because a lot of them have the similar theme. So I'll lump a bunch together and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. I don't think I'm going to be able to still get to them all, but I can break this into two podcasts. We'll do 30 minutes now and 30 minutes next week, and I'll do my best to answer all your questions. So there you go. Before I do me a favor. If you are looking for additional help with your anxiety issues, theanxioustruth.com/recovery guide is where you will find my book. People are asking about that as well. I wrote it as a course on how to recover from your anxiety disorder. 400 pages, incredibly detailed in a logical sequence. So if you're looking for more help, that is the most effective way that I have to deliver you a lot of information in a logical way. So it's theanxioustruth.com/recovery guide. You can go and learn about the book. It's 400 printed pages. It's a big work. It took me a very long time to write it. You could download a sample, a chapter or two. I think there's an audio chapter that you can grab also for free, and you can find any place where you can go get the book, whether it's in the US or abroad. So check it out if you'd like to. I'd appreciate that, and hopefully it would help. That's why I wrote it, was to be able to help people. Let's get cooking here. Part one of questions. Here we go. So Rebecca asked, and I'm going to try not to, by the way, butcher people's names. So you're just going to bear with me. I'll do the best that I can. Rebecca asks, I just started therapy. How do I make the most out of it to get the most out of it? That's a really, really good question, Rebecca. Thank you for asking. Here's the deal with therapy. Two things. Number one, you got to find the right therapist. So really and truly, to solve these problems, anxiety disorders that we are always talking about, you really, really need to find a therapist that specializes in treating anxiety disorders. They're out there. They're harder to find. But here's a hint. If you're spending all your time in your therapy sessions just talking about how you feel and what's going on, then you likely don't have the best therapist for you. If you're trying to solve a problem like panic disorder, agoraphobia, GAD, social anxiety, OCD, and you spend all the time in therapy just talking about how it's going and how you're feeling, talking about relationship issues in your past, not terribly effective to solve the problem that you have. So first you got to find the right therapist, somebody who is specializing in a cognitive behavioral approach to the problem. That's CBT, REBT, DBT, ACT. Those are all the letters that go along with that. And then once you have that therapist or somebody at least as close to it as you can get, you're going to have to embrace and accept the fact that you have an active role to play now. You are an active participant in the therapeutic process. This problem will not be solved by sitting in your therapist's office and talking to him or her and just listening to them once a week. Your therapist, if they're doing a good job, first of all, you're going to hate them now and then. And that's kind of a running joke among behavioral therapists. If their clients are not hating them, at least sometime they're not doing it right. So you're going to really be pissed off at your therapist now and then. They will give you homework. They're going to give you assignments. They're going to teach you new tools. They're going to teach you new skills. They're going to make you practice them. They're going to make you do things like ERP. They're going to make you go through exposures. They're going to make you work for this. This is hard work. So understand and embrace the fact that you will be an active participant in your recovery process. Do the work. That's how you get the most out of this. Do not expect that you're going to fix the problem just by sitting in a therapist's office and talking for an hour a week. It won't work that way. So let's move on here. What is the best way to deal with, Molly asks, what's the best way to deal with the urge to talk about feelings often and seek reassurance? It's a really good question, Molly. Thank you for asking. And the fact that you even asked the question tells me that you're already a step ahead, which is excellent. So good for you. What a lot of people wind up doing in this situation is you can use a tool where you just insert a pause. So the fact that you know that this is a behavior you have to change is really good. So when you feel that urge to go back into that old habit, and this is a safety and reassurance behavior, right? So when you feel the urge to go back into that old habit and launch into yet another explanation about how you're feeling, what your symptoms are, your new sensation, your new health anxiety, your new worry, when you want to start rehashing those things again with anyone who will listen to you, insert a pause. 30 seconds of silence. That's all you need. Time it on your watch or your phone, or take the best estimate you have, but try and get yourself 30 seconds at least. At the end of those 30 seconds, go ahead and start talking, or ask yourself, can I do another 30 seconds? See if you can do a minute or two of silence. Many times just inserting that pause will allow you to inject a little bit of objectivity into your thought process, and it will remind you, oh, that's right. I'm not supposed to do this. I know that I'm just trying to make myself feel better right now. I'm feeling unsure. I'm afraid. So I need to try and soothe that, but I shouldn't be doing that. So it will allow you the chance to regroup and maybe be a little bit objective about your state. Oh, that's right. I'm uncomfortable, but it's okay. I can be uncomfortable. And then you will likely find at the end of 30 or 60 or 90 seconds that, okay, I'm allowed to talk now, but I'm not going to do it. And just know that that will make you uncomfortable. Like, not talking means I'm not saving myself. You're not engaging in the safety behavior. That will make you uncomfortable and afraid, or feel a little more vulnerable. It will feel unnatural. It won't feel right. Takes time. Give yourself time. Good question though. Try to insert the pause. It helps for a lot of people. So Becca asks, Becca's clearly from the UK, and I can tell because of the terminology. So, hey, Becca, I always think you need to go to A&E, which in the US we would call the ER, or the emergency room, when you have a panic attack because you can't breathe. Any tips? So I'm going to address anybody else here in the questions who has asked me about a physical symptom, whether I see a question about dizziness, I see a question about heartbeat, I see a question about breathing, I see a question about stomach. They're all the same. And I want to say two things. The question, any tips, which I hear all the time. Every day I'm going to get questions that end, any tips, or any tips for heart anxiety, any tips for sleep, any tips for nausea, any tips for dizziness, any tips for leaving the house, any tips for... The question, any tips, would seem like a very small question for you to ask, right? But what you are really asking is, can you please tell me what the true nature of this disorder is and how I can recover from it? And that is a big answer, right? It's a big answer. So behind the question, any tips, is a very large question that has a very big answer. Not a hard answer. That's not a difficult answer. It's a very simple answer, but it's a big answer, and it requires learning. It requires understanding. It requires doing action, changing your behaviors. It's a lot. So that's a big question that has a big answer. That's why I had to write 400 pages in a book to try and answer it. And I still didn't get everything right. So here's the deal. That's the real story behind any tips. When you're asking any tips, be aware that you are thinking that you are going to somehow solve this problem by just getting some tips and changing a few things, doing a few things. That's not true. So I urge you to start to really understand the true nature of these disorders. And you could start, it's free. Go to theanxioustruth.com/start here and start listening to my very earliest podcast episodes. And they explain the foundation of it. The earliest episodes are your go-tos. So start learning before you ask for tips. It's a big answer and there's a lot to learn. But here's the deal about going to A&E or emergency room. And this is going to hold true for anybody who asks a question about a specific symptom that you think is more scary than any other symptom. You must understand that approaching this disorder as a symptom problem, where you need to save yourself from your symptoms, from the sensations, the feelings in your body, the thoughts that come with it, is wrong. It is perpetuating the problem. It will never solve the problem that way. And acting because of what it feels like is the problem. That's the problem. So what it feels like is never what it actually is. And every last thing that you have ever done or will do to save yourself when you are afraid of your own body or thoughts, which is the one fear, you are only really afraid of one thing. You're afraid of your own body and thoughts. Anything that you have ever done in the past or will ever do in the future to save yourself from that fear is absolutely useless, pointless, and has never saved you, not even once, and never will. Why? Because you are afraid. That is true. You are uncomfortable. That's very true, but you are not in danger. The problem here is that you have decided that the way your body feels and the thoughts that come with that you must escape from that, avoid that, and be saved from that. And that is not true and never has been. Being afraid and uncomfortable is not, in this situation, equal to being in danger. So going to the A&E has never been required. They've never fixed anything for you. Maybe they've given you some Xanax and sent you home, and it never will fix anything. And if you're going to continue to act as if you must treat your symptoms and react to them and be saved from them, then you will be stuck in this disorder for quite a long time. So the way we do this differently is that we learn and we accept this, what I'm telling you, that this is what the nature of the disorder is. And then we say, well, now I have to start to experience these things without trying to save myself, which is really hard and scary, but you're already scared. So you might as well do scary things productively, right? We must learn to experience these things in a new way with a new set of non-reactions and still wind up okay. So instead of calling for help, talking about it, doing special things, trying to, snap rubber bands, slap cold water on your face, run to the A&E or the ER, whatever we're going to call it, wherever you are, you do nothing. You learn to essentially do nothing, and it passes anyway, and you wind up okay. And over time, the fear center in your brain learns, oh, I never had to do any of those things. I've been wrong all this time. That's when it changes. All right. So as you can see, I've been talking about this exact thing at its core for 5 years into this microphone. And I wrote a 400-page book about it. I'm sure I'm going to write more in the future. So any tips is a small question that is actually a big question with a very big answer. And that is the beginning of the answer. So start to learn about the true nature of these disorders and how we solve them. That's how I'm going to answer that question. I know I gave you a lot there. Okay, Audrey. Audrey asked, any advice on how to deal with pain due to a medical condition triggering anxiety? So Audrey, I know Audrey, by the way, so just so you guys, full disclosure, we kind of know each other already. Audrey, I'm sorry that you're dealing with that. That sounds like no fun. And anybody who is dealing with a true medical condition, again, I'm sorry about that. And I hope that it passes for you guys. So here's the deal. I need you to understand that there are actually 3 different things happening there, and each one of them has a border around it. The first thing that's happening is you have a medical condition, and it is causing some pain. That's issue number 1. Put it on the side and draw a line around it. That's the border. It's its own independent thing. Number 2 is you are a human being, and any human being, whether they have an anxiety problem or not, is going to experience a bit of uncertainty, fear, worry, and anxiety when they are ill. That's just part of being human and normal. That's okay. That's to be expected. That is issue number 2. Draw a box around it. There's a border around that issue. Now take the first box, the condition, and the second box, the normal human anxiety and fear, and glue them together because they do go together. But now we have box number 3. That's the anxiety disorder. That's the part that doesn't need to be there. And Audrey, I know you've been down this road before, so I know you know the tools and the techniques that we've always been talking about. I know you've read Claire Weeks. I know you've read my book. I know you know what you're talking about with that. And you have to begin to recognize that you experience discomfort because of your condition. It triggers some feelings of uncertainty and anxiety, and then you interpret those to an extreme degree. That is not required. So you take you take the normal uncertainty and discomfort and fear and the unknown that comes along with the condition, and you then magnify it 100 times by engaging in what if, trying to predict the long-term future, thinking about the worst possible case outcome, thinking that you can't handle it, thinking that just the feelings themselves and the emotions are disastrous, and you hit the panic button because you feel things. Those are the things that you don't have to do. So unfortunately, the pain that comes along with your medical condition and the uncertainty that comes along with that is going to be your new exposure to a certain extent. You're going to have to learn to say, okay, right now I'm really uncomfortable physically and I don't like it and it's making me agitated, but I can it's okay. I can handle this. I will handle it. I don't have to add fear of fear. So that is how you deal with that. And anybody else that is dealing with that same situation, when I get sick, my anxiety goes through the roof. No, that's not true. When you get sick, you react to that by turning normal worry and normal discomfort into a 5-alarm fire that it doesn't have to be. So it's important to recognize that is going on. Like, those obsessive and irrational and racing thought patterns. What if, not required. Not required. That's important. So I'm going to tie that into a couple of people who asked, how do you know the difference? Where was it here? How do you know the difference between an anxiety symptom and a real problem? Let me see, where was that? No. I'm sorry. Where was it? Where is it? Yes, two or three people asked that. How do you know, basically, how do you tell the difference between what is anxiety and what is an actual medical issue? So we're going to kind of lead to that, I think, because that goes part of that. If when you get sick, it sends your anxiety through the roof, doesn't, it's your reaction to getting sick. And that thing too, how do you know the difference between anxiety and a medical condition? Well, let me answer it in two ways. First of all, when you are actually sick, and every human being walking the planet beyond around 7 or 8 years old, when you're old enough to have this experience and remember it, knows what being sick or injured feels like. We know that. We have that experience. We all know what it is, right? When you are sick or injured, you are dealing with a present impairment. Presently, there's something wrong presently that I am dealing with that is causing problems for me. Okay, no problem. That happens sometimes. When you are dealing with the anxiety part of it, you are essentially trying to predict what might be wrong. So it has nothing to do with how you feel right this minute. It is the fact that you interpret how you feel this minute as being indicative of what might happen that is horrible, terrible, and dangerous in 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 weeks from now. That's the difference. The difference is that when you were dealing with anxiety, you are extrapolating into the future, and you don't have to do that. So that's the deal with that. Understand that's what that is. Like when you are actually ill or you have a condition, it is a present concern. The anxiety is what you are afraid might happen because you are taking how you feel and what you think and somehow trying to extrapolate what will happen based on that. Like, what if it is this? What if? Like being sick does not involve what if. Anxiety involves what if. So there's that. Let's talk about, let's see here. Let's take this question here. Well, somebody asked a question, two people did actually, about withdrawal from benzodiazepines, but I'm going to lump it together with benzos and antidepressants. First of all, withdrawal, if you're coming off medication, whether it's a benzo and antidepressant, it's a real thing, right? It's a real issue. You got to work with your doctor on this. Make sure that you're getting good advice. It's a real issue. That's a physiological issue. Your body is undergoing changes because you've taken away some medication it has become either used to or actually physically dependent upon. Real physical issue, and it's a real thing. And my heart goes out to anybody who's dealing with it. I dealt with it many years ago. I didn't deal with benzo withdrawal. I dealt with antidepressant withdrawal, and I wrote about it extensively in my first book. So here's the deal. None of what I'm talking about in the podcast or that I say on social media will stop that from happening. I wish it did, but it doesn't. So I can't stop it from happening, nor can I make it go away. But what we are learning in terms of what I wrote in the book, what I say in the podcast, what I say on social media, can help you avoid the pitfall of developing some bad cognitive and behavioral habits in response to what you feel in withdrawal. So I can't make it go away with these techniques and tools and concepts that I talk about. But if you can learn these things and apply them, you can come out the other side without having developed some really bad, nasty, fear-based behavioral and brain habits. So that's how this all relates to withdrawal. There's nothing you could do to make the feelings, the physiological, the chemical things go away when you're in withdrawal. Just time is going to do that. But you can learn to not add additional fear and suffering on top of what you're already dealing with. I wish I had a better answer, but that's the answer that I have, unfortunately. So let's talk about this one. How can I help my hubby to not believe the lies his anxiety is telling him? Melissa, I assume. Excellent, excellent question. And thank you for asking it, because you clearly love your husband and you're trying to help. And I always appreciate that. But here's the answer. You can't. You cannot help your husband believe a thing with your words. He will never believe anything because of your words or his words or my words or anyone else's words. He will only understand and believe that the anxiety is lying to him when he actually starts to change the way he behaves and experiences it for himself in a different way. So you could try to soothe him and make him believe, and he'll get some sort of temporary buy-in, temporary relief. You'll make him feel a little bit better for a short amount of time. That might be 5 minutes. It might be 2 days, but then he'll be back again, which I'm sure you've experienced. So because we cannot solve this problem with words, because our fear centers in our brains don't understand those words, what you can do is help him to start to understand the true nature of the disorder and what he needs to do to teach himself through action and new routines that the anxiety is a lie. That's the best answer I can give you on that one. It's a great question, though. I appreciate it, and I thank you for supporting your husband. I do. Not that you need me to do that, but I thank you anyway, because it's a nice thing to do. So Bridget asks, what part do all the other practices play in recovery? And she's specifically talking about, things like different teas and crystals and inner child work and that sort of stuff. So Bridget's either trying to like wind me up because you guys are like, oh no, here he goes. But it's a good question. I'm going to address it. Here's the deal. All of those things are fine. They really are. Like, take care of yourself physically. Keep your body as healthy as it possibly can. Eat well, eat a balanced diet, exercise, make sure you're not deficient in the important nutrients. I would endorse all of that. Every human being should do that, anxiety or not. Every human being should do those things. So by all means, do everything you can do to keep your body as healthy as it can be. I absolutely fully endorse and encourage that. Additionally, you should take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually as best you can as well. There's nothing wrong with that. I endorse all of those things. We should do all those things, like good emotional, spiritual, mental, physical health. That should be a goal of every human walking the planet, not just people trying to recover from an anxiety disorder. So I'm never saying to not do those things, but here's what I am saying. If you have been changing your diet for the last 1.5 years or 2 years, I eliminated dairy, I don't drink caffeine, I'm only doing this, I'm eating whole foods, I'm doing this, I'm adding celery, whatever it is you're doing. If you are into the healing power of crystals, if you are into Reiki, if you are into whatever else, inner child work, if you're into all of those things, that's totally fine. But I need you to be honest and say, if I have been doing these things for the last 6 months, 2 years, 6 years, 10 years, and I'm still listening to anxiety podcasts, I'm still in anxiety groups online, I'm still reading anxiety books, then have you solved the anxiety problem? I'm not saying that those things are invalid, but I am pretty sure that those are not going to solve your anxiety problem. They are not going to cure your anxiety disorder. If they make you feel good and they bring you pleasure, then there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But be careful about feeling physically good and healthy, about having emotional, spiritual, and mental pleasure and good feelings, and solving your anxiety problem. Those things are not necessarily the same. So all I'm going to say is those are not bad things to engage in life, but you must be honest with yourself. Are you actually seeing a change in your anxiety situation? And what I mean by change is, are you actually solving this problem? Not are you knocking down symptoms one by one until another one pops up? Not are you managing to engineer 2 and 3 good weeks at a time and then the wheels fall off again on a regular basis? That's not solving the problem. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do any of those things, but I would urge you to be really brutally honest with yourself and say, is this actually solving the problem, or is this sort of massaging the problem temporarily from time to time? If I actually solve this, I think you're going to find the answer in a lot of cases, unfortunately, is not. So people will say to me all the time, why don't you be more open-minded about this stuff? And my answer to that is, why do I have to be the open-minded one? I'm the one who is dealing with literally thousands of people who have been playing with healing crystals for 2 and 3 years at a time and still cannot drive to the mall by themselves. So why do I have to be open-minded about crystals when I see crystals or essential oils or teas or dietary changes? I see with my own eyes people who are not actually solving the problem. They are either seeing no change or they're just nibbling around the edges and they keep falling back down the hole every 2 and 3 weeks or every 2 and 3 months. So what is there to be open-minded? I'm seeing with my own eyes the fact that these are often not solutions to the problem. So I'm going to turn it around and say, maybe it's time, if you're still in this situation and you're engaging in these things, maybe you need to start to look to have a bit of an open mind. Maybe I need to add something different here. Maybe I do need to look more cognitively and behaviorally here, even though I don't like the sound of it because it sounds scary. So I'm going to leave it as that. Do healthy things. I support that. Do things that you love. Do things that make you happy. Do things that nourish your spirit. I'm all for all of those things and your body. But just know when you're actually solving your anxiety problem and when you are not. It matters. Let's talk about relapses, because a bunch of people asked about that. And thank you, Bridget, for the question. I think I did a pretty good job of not ranting too bad about that. So a few people asked about relapses. What helped me back on track? How do I avoid relapses? How do I avoid a setback? What do you do when you have a setback? There's a bunch of those, right? So let's talk about that before we end up. And then we're going to pick up the rest of the issue. The rest of the questions we'll do in part 2 next week. So here's the deal about setback and relapse. There's no such thing. And I know you're going to say, of course there is. I'm in one right now. But 99% of the time, and I feel confident saying that because I deal with a lot of people, 99% of the time when somebody says I'm in a relapse or I had a setback, if you sit them down and actually work through the process, you will find that what this person has done is sort of engineer an acceptable sort of zone where they've managed to wiggle around the anxiety. They've wiggled around the fear. They can kind of get daily life done. It's better than it used to be. For an agoraphobic, for instance, they're not housebound anymore, but they're still living in a comfort zone. So here's how you prevent setback, and here's how you deal with setback or relapse when it happens. Setback and relapse just means you stopped doing the things that you know you're supposed to do to keep moving forward. And you did that for various reasons. Either they're too scary, they're too hard, or you felt like I moved forward enough. That's acceptable to me. And you stopped. And at the same time, you began engaging in bad habits that you know that you should not be doing anymore. That's usually because of just old habits die hard, and you stopped doing the forward progress work because it was too hard, too scary, or you just did enough in your mind and you were fine. You thought you were fine. Or something happened. You experienced panic after you hadn't for 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe you had some other bad experience and you immediately went back to the old reassurance, safety, avoidance, and escape. So relapse and setback is I'm not doing the things I know I'm supposed to do for various reasons, and I'm doing the things again that I know I'm not supposed to do for various reasons. That is relapse and setback. There's no relapse and setback. An anxiety disorder is not cancer. You know, like when somebody gets the news that there's cancerous growth again after they thought they were in remission, that's terrible news for people who have cancer, but that's not what we got. So you are in control of that in many ways. Stop thinking of it as a disease that somehow returns after you thought you had it cured. You make the cure by going all the way through. And here's the definition of all the way through. If you still have a comfort zone, you're not done. You're not done. You have resolved this disorder that you have when there is no more comfort zone. When the world is your comfort zone, then you're done. So keep going until the world is your comfort zone. That is my advice to you. That's how we handle relapse and setback. That's when we have them, we get back on the horse. We own our role in it and we get back on the horse. How do you prevent them? Keep going. Do not accept this is good enough. I feel okay. This is good enough. Don't do it because it's going to come back and bite you in the butt. So I actually made an entire podcast episode called The Acceptable Bubble. If you go to theanxioustruth.com and search acceptable bubble, you'll see there's an entire 30 minutes just on that. And if you're dealing with setback and relapse, it will help you. You will probably find that really helpful. Let me go back for a second to the folks who were talking about, it was Molly who had asked about the urge to talk about things. There's a podcast episode called The Habit of Words. If you go to theanxioustruth.com and search Habit of Words, you'll find that one. That will be a good one. And let's see if there's another one that I can kind of grab real quick before we wrap it up, because we got another maybe minute or two, and then I'm going to save the rest for next week. Let's talk about, and that's a bigger one. Let's not do that. Oh, here we go. Is anxiety recovery harder when OCD is involved? That's a difficult question to answer. OCD is an absolute challenge. Now, I didn't have the problem myself, but I've got enough friends dealing with OCD right now where, you know, I'm dealing and you know, luckily to be collaborating with other professionals who are dealing with OCD treatment to understand that OCD is an absolute challenge. It's a bear. It is. Is it harder than the other ones? Well, that's kind of subjective. And my answer to this is be careful about searching for that label. Like, well, OCD is harder. Well, OCD is hard, but you have what you have, just like the agoraphobic has what they have. And it doesn't do us any good to compare each other. We should not be I shouldn't be comparing my anxiety problem to yours. You shouldn't be comparing your anxiety problem to someone else's. Well, I'm worse because I have OCD. I'm worse because I have agoraphobia. No, let's not do that. You have what you have, and we all have what we have, and you are capable of handling what it is you have. Everybody listening to me right now is 100% capable of handling whatever it is they have, whether it's OCD or GAD or panic disorder, agoraphobia, whatever it is. We are all capable of handling those things. So is OCD harder? OCD is hard. I don't know if it's harder. And be careful about trying to like somehow convince yourself that it is. What's the difference whether it's hard or not hard? It's what you got, and you're capable of dealing with what you got. So there you go. Okay, so let's wrap it up. I don't want to go too long. We'll do another 30 minutes next week. Their questions next week are all about like needing certainty, accepting things outside of our control. What else do we have here? We talked about relapse, which is fine. We're going to talk about intrusive and sticky thoughts. We're going to talk about there's some parenting issues. People asked about that. We're going to talk about a little health anxiety. We're talking about some sleep issues and stuff like that. So I appreciate you guys coming by. We're going to kick in a little Ben Drake Afterglow because that's the way we end all of the podcasts. I appreciate you giving me your time like you do every week. I really do. I appreciate your support. If you are listening on iTunes or any place where you can rate and review the podcast, leave a rating or leave a review, because if it's helping you, then that helps other people find the podcast too. And I would appreciate that because you'll be helping someone else if you do it. Anyway, so that's the deal. Ben Drake Afterglow will play you out. You can find Ben at facebook.com/Ben Drake Music. I'm eternally grateful for Ben for having allowed me to use this song because it's got a special connection to the podcast. So thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. See you guys next week in episode 122. We'll answer more questions. Have a good one.
Yeah, you're on your way. It's in the afterglow. It's in the lyrics of the songs we know. It's in these feelings that you never show. Yeah, you're doing fine. It's all around you, you can breathe it in. And this is where your story begins. You got the feeling that you're gonna win.